समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
From the infinite darkness of its orbit, more than 100,000 kilometers from Earth, surveillance satellite Vela 6911 looked down at the tiny twin flashes of light below. Event 747, as it was logged on surveillance computers, had taken place on the Prince Edward Islands, 2,200 kilometers from Cape Town. The sensitive hydroacoustic data acquisition system at Accession Island soon confirmed the event. Later, even more evidence emerged from the thyroid glands of Australian sheep, which had grazed along the path of the radioactive plume that had drifted east across the Indian Ocean. To most scientists, it was evident even then that one nation or more had tested a nuclear weapon on 22 September 1979. United States leaders, however, decided it was wise not to know more. They feared that the disclosure of what was the first Israeli test of a nuclear weapon could jeopardize the peace process in the Middle East. President Jimmy Carter asked a panel of experts to provide him with a list of other reasons that might conceivably explain the twin flashes. Even though he was soon equipped with an ironclad excuse from his pliant scientists, the president chose not to hide the truth from himself. He wrote in his diary, and I quote, "We have a growing belief among our scientists that the Israelis did indeed conduct a nuclear test explosion in the ocean near the southern end of South Africa." But that was that. That hasn't remained the case, however. Earlier this week, President Donald Trump announced that United States negotiators will begin direct talks with Iran on its nuclear program in the Kingdom of Oman. For its part, Iran has confirmed the talks will take place, but says they'll be indirect, with Oman's Foreign Minister Badr Abu Saidi mediating between the two diplomatic delegations who will be in different rooms. Finding a middle ground will prove tough because there will be an elephant in the negotiating room. Israel already has nuclear weapons it does not acknowledge in public, which Iran sees as an existential threat to its regime. To bring proper nuclear stability to the Middle East, the true nature of the problem has to be acknowledged and engaged with. Even as both sides' negotiators prepare to catch their flights to Muscat, there are reports that Trump has moved large numbers of B-2 bombers to the United States base at Diego Garcia. The B-2s are believed to be capable of delivering munitions that can destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities. Last month, though, US Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff revealed that Trump had also written to Iran's government saying, "We should talk, we should clear up misconceptions, we should clear a verification program so that nobody worries about the weaponization of your nuclear material." That's precisely what former President Barack Obama had sought to do in 2015 through an agreement involving Iran, Germany, and the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, that is the US, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France. But then Trump resigned from the agreement, citing Iranian work on ballistic missiles as a continuing threat to Israel. And that's where the matter's been hanging since then. Ever since the release of a 3-part Israeli television documentary last year, the country's notoriously secretive nuclear program has had considerable public airing. The documentary, The Atom in Me, centers around interviews with Benjamin Bloomberg, the head of the Israeli scientific intelligence agency responsible for the nuclear mission. Lakam, Bloomberg's agency, was so secretive that its work was often withheld from Israel's external intelligence service, Mossad. The interviews were recorded in 2018 with a promise not to air them until Bloomberg's death. Large parts of the story, though, have long been well known outside Israel, ever since the publication of historian Avner Cohen's superb book on Israel's nuclear program. Israel joined the US Atoms for Peace Civilian Nuclear Technology Initiative in 1955, leading to a reactor being established at Nahal Sorek in 1960. However, the country's leaders soon realized that the Atoms for Peace framework was of absolutely no help in developing a nuclear weapon. Its leaders turned instead to France. Like Israel, France also believed that it needed its own nuclear weapons to ensure survival in a dangerous world. French assistance, including access for Israeli scientists to nuclear research facilities, laid the foundations for Israel's atomic weapons program in the mid-1950s. Then French Prime Minister Guy Mollet, guilty of having drawn Israel into the Suez Canal crisis in 1956, which undermined the fledgling state's relationship with both the US and the Soviet Union, emotionally declared, "I owe them the bomb. I owe it to them." He kept his word. French commitment to Israel's nuclear weapon program became explicit from the outset of work on the Dimona nuclear reactor in 1958. The plans included all the technological components required for a plutonium-based nuclear weapon, including underground facilities to extract plutonium from spent uranium. From at least 1960, declassified documents reveal the US was aware the Dimona reactor was designed not for the production of energy, but for weapons-grade plutonium. Large amounts of equipment that Israel could not legitimately acquire, it simply stole, Victor Glinsky and Leonard Weiss have recorded, just like other states in a similar situation like Pakistan and North Korea and many others. In 1968, weapons production quantities of uranium-235 were stolen from a facility in Pennsylvania. The operation appears to have involved some of the same Mossad operatives who kidnapped the Nazi leader Adolf Eichmann from Argentina and brought him to face justice in Jerusalem. The spy, arms dealer, and film producer Arnold Milchan, similarly, was involved in the theft of high-speed switches needed to trigger an explosion called kryptons. The story soon expanded to include a very disturbing relationship with apartheid-era South Africa, with Israel using the services of the former brigadier and mercenary Jonathan Blau to acquire uranium. In return, Israel helped South Africa with both conventional military know-how and assistance for the apartheid state's own weapons program. From declassified documents revealed in 2010, it is clear Israel was willing to sell technology South Africa would use to intimidate its black African neighbors. In one letter dated 11 November 1974, then Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres wrote that Israel and the South African apartheid government shared a, I quote, common hatred of injustice. To the US, it was clear from at least 1969 that Israel was a nuclear power, if an undisclosed one. In one memo, then National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger made clear that Tel Aviv had at least a dozen surface-to-surface French-made missiles capable of delivering nuclear weapons, as well as an arsenal of 24 to 30 warheads. This clearly flew in the face of assurances the Israelis had previously made America. The previous year, Kissinger noted, then Ambassador and later to be Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin had promised Israel would not be, I quote, the first to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East. But here it had. Following protracted decisions at the White House on the 26th of September 1969, President Richard Nixon and Prime Minister Golda Meir arrived at a landmark secret deal. The US, the deal stipulated, would act as if Israel had no nuclear bombs, thus allowing it to continue receiving military assistance as long as Israel kept them secret. Israeli leaders, however, knew that actual deterrence against their Middle East adversaries could only be established when everyone was certain Israel's nuclear bomb actually worked. Hence, that test on Prince Edward Island and the willful cover-up that followed in the West. To move forward in the Muscat talks, it's necessary to understand the existential anxieties that drove Israel are identical to those which underpin the behavior of Iran and other states with nuclear weapons programs. Iran fears that shorn of its missiles and nuclear capabilities, it could be dismantled by its richer Arab neighbors or by the United States. Trump and Iranian negotiators will have to find guarantees that address the concerns of Iran, but also its adversaries like Israel and Saudi Arabia. Is there such a middle ground? Nuclear theorist Kenneth Walt suggested in 1951 that when it comes to nuclear weapons, I quote, more may be better. Their very nature, Waltz argued, meant that, I quote, the measured spread of nuclear weapons is more to be welcomed than feared. This, he went on, was because in a conventional world, deterrent threats are ineffective because the damage threatened is distant, limited, and problematic. Nuclear weapons, Waltz argued, make military miscalculations difficult and politically pertinent prediction easy. Put simply, and I quote again, in a conventional world, one is uncertain about winning or losing. In a nuclear world, one is uncertain only about surviving or being annihilated. There are no winners. Iran's regime, the argument goes, no more seeks annihilation than does Israel or North Korea or Pakistan or India or China or Russia or the United States. The final answer might then lie in Iran being able to acquire nuclear weapons, whether through design or the failure of negotiations. Even if the US attacks Iran now, most experts concur, that will at most delay Iran's acquisition of nuclear weapons by some time. The consequences for the Middle East might seem terrifying, but it might just prove the least destabilizing of many terrible choices. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor at ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.